The name's Bond. James Bond. Hello, my fellow Bond fans, and welcome, willkommen to my latest video, in which today I start my updated ranking of all 25 official James Bond films. Yes, this is the big one, folks. This is part 1 of 5 of this ranking. Yes, I'm going to do this ranking in 5 parts, being that there's 25 movies. I've been thinking about this for the last few days in terms of my list and how it's going to change. I mean, the last time I did a Bond ranking, I think, was about 6 years ago. So it's well and truly time for an update. But I'm doing it in more parts because last time my ranking was very long. It was extremely long and too long. I thought way too long. The last video was over an hour long and I thought, no, that is too excessive. And it actually balances out quite nicely because there are 25 films. I can talk about 5 movies in each part. So yeah, with the release of No Time to Die, I've now been given the chance to finally update the ranking. And just to be clear, it's just the 25 Eon films. Not going to rank the unofficial movies. Maybe I'll rank the unofficial movies at a later date, but as of now, this is the list. That is my own personal preference of how I rank each movie. If you do disagree with my opinion, that's absolutely fine. Just note that it is my opinion and it's a subjective opinion. It's not an objective list, this is a subjective list. So I just want to make that clear, and I just want there to be no hostility in the comments section. Keep things civil. We can agree to disagree, but any trolls, any nasty intent, and your comment will be removed. Thank you. Also, I will say, when I get to talk about No Time to Die in the list, I will make sure I keep the spoilers at a minimum. I won't talk about spoilers of No Time to Die in this video or any of the other parts of the ranking. Simply because some people may not have seen the movie yet, so I don't want to ruin anything. But as for the rest of the movies, they'll be spoiled. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin. Number 25. Now, this is the most obvious choice, really, for the list for me. Number 25 is Die Another Day. Fuck me. Die Another Day is easily my least favourite Bond movie. This movie is just horrible. This movie is awful. Such a terrible way for Pierce Brosnan to leave the franchise, and I feel so bad for the guy. He always tried his best in the movies, I'll give him that. And, you know, he was given such a terrible script. The script for this film, it is awful. It is fucking awful. I really think he deserved better to go out with. And it just proves that the Bond franchise had gone so far up its own arse, it didn't know what it was anymore, and it became too fantastical. It became too outlandish. Even in the Roger Moore era, there was a certain limit. Okay, maybe with the exception of Moonraker, there was a limit to how outrageous and outlandish some of the concepts were, particularly with the gadgets. But in this case, we have like the invisible car and oh, it's all just too much, and it doesn't help that they're constantly shoving references down your throat because it's the 40th anniversary. Also, the CGI is just awful, and oh, I just can't stand it. I really can't stand it. The Madonna song is crap, the titles are not very good. I mean, the fire and ice effects are kind of cool, but merging with the torture scenes, it doesn't really work. The movie's trying to be serious, and it's trying to be campy. It doesn't really know what it wants to be. It comes off as a sort of XXX Vin Diesel action shoot-'em-up movie. I mean, I'll admit some of the action is well choreographed, like the fencing fight and the car chase. Those are my 2 favourite scenes in this film, simply because I can watch them for light entertainment. The rest of the movie is a bore fest. It drags on for 2 hours, 13 minutes. I didn't like the plot with the DNA reconstruction. I thought the Bond girls were crap. You know, Halle Berry as Jinx. Yeah, well, what do predators do when the sun goes down? They feast like there's no tomorrow. Oh, and we have Rosamund Pike as well, who plays Miranda, and again, they're just doing a similar thing to what they did in The World Is Not Enough, having her as a twist villain, a female twist villain. And at the end of the day, this movie just does not honour 40 years of James Bond the way that it should. Again, if you can enjoy this movie as a light romp for the action, then good for you. But for me, I just cannot enjoy it because the script is terrible. Brosnan is trying, but he can't save it. Judi Dench is perhaps the best performance in the movie. And in a way, that's the saddest aspect, that Judi Dench is the best performance in the film as M. And she's barely in it. She's in a couple of scenes. Also, I hate the villains. I just don't like this film. It's a really... I mean, I'll give it this. The soundtrack is alright, and some of the locales are good and everything. There's definitely a Bondian feel to this movie, but in a way there isn't. It's really weird. And whilst the references, I suppose, are appreciated, they're not handled in the best way possible. To be honest, the plot was just so ridiculous that I just stopped caring after a while. And again, the villains are terrible. Gustav Graves and Zal, get out of here, man. It's just really difficult to watch this movie and place it as a James Bond anniversary movie, or even just a Bond film sometimes. But I'm not going to go into a long rant about this because I've already ranted on the movie. So I'll leave you to watch that to get my full, thoughts. This is just a digest version. So number 24 is going to be Tomorrow Never Dies. Better than Die Another Day. I'll give it that. Tomorrow Never Dies, I've just never cared for this one. This one, the plot is ridiculous. Elliot Carver wanting to cause World War III over broadcasting rights? What? I understand if it's trying to be similar to, say, one of the Roger Moore films, which was meant to be like fun, and I understand that, that's something fine, but I just think that it's, again, a little too ridiculous for me, and I think this movie has basically just gratuitous amounts of action. It just throws the action on screen, and after a while, I just got really tired of it. I suffered from action fatigue, and I just was not engaged with this plot. I just couldn't get into it, really. I mean, I don't mind Michelle Yeoh as Waylin, but there's not much to her character. She's just there to basically kick ass, I mean, which is fine. I mean, I'm all for females getting those kind of roles, but I just don't think she has any chemistry with Brosnan. Brosnan is actually a bit better, I think, than he is in GoldenEye. I think he does give a slightly more energetic performance. Don't care for the title song or the sequence. Terry Hatcher was wasted as Paris Carver. I mean, I suppose she wasn't meant to be in it that much, but I didn't think her acting was all that. The score by David Arnold is good, and some of the action is good. It's entertaining in places, but it's not one that I revisit much because I just don't think there's much substance to the plot, and I think it's too, like, they've gone back to basics. And it was like GoldenEye had a pretty solid plot and a pretty solid narrative. This one is just, yeah, let's just make kind of a video game. And I hate to say that, it does feel a bit like we're going from one level to the next. I mean, there's a couple of decent moments in it, don't get me wrong, and I don't know why they brought Jack Wade back. That was a bit stupid. The fact that they dedicated this one to Cubby Broccoli, for shame. Look, it's better than Die Another Day because it's not, the script isn't as bad. It's not like they're throwing out these cheesy puns every 2 minutes. That's that was insufferable. We've still got Desmond Llewellyn in it. The MI6 regulars are great. Judi Dench is always great, as always. The direction by Roger Spottiswoode, it's not the best, but it's not the worst, but it's down there for me. I personally just cannot get into this film. I'm sorry. So, number 23 is Diamonds Are Forever.
Diamonds are forever. Hold one up and then caress it. Touch it, stroke it, and undress it. I know
a lot of people are going to be shocked to see me put it this low, but again, I'm sorry, it's just my opinion that I don't like this film that much. Look, I don't hate it. It's not an outright disaster. I love the Shirley Bassey song, and I love the title sequence. I think those are some of the best of the franchise. It is great to have Sean Connery back. Don't get me wrong. Sean Connery was definitely needed after the disappointment of George Lazenby's performance in the previous film. But the film itself really suffers after you watch Majesties. It's just, I don't know. I really just, I struggle to get into this one again. I'm okay with campy Bond. I'm fine with that. I'm happy to have a laugh with James Bond. I just think that this particular film goes too far. Dressing Blofeld in drag, I mean, was that really necessary? All the characters like Bambi and Thumper and Mr. Winter, Mr. Kidd. Yeah, I don't think they're that funny, personally. I mean, I appreciate some people enjoy this movie as a fun romp, and that's fine. I mean, to each their own. I will give it this. I like Charles Gray as Blofeld. I think he's very good, except the part when he goes in drag. Connery's good. He's certainly more interested in the role now than he was in You Only Live Twice, and it's nice to see him go out on a better performance. But the movie, ooh, I just think also the fact they had to pay Sean Connery so much to come back really cheapens the rest of the movie. This movie has a really cheap look to it. They have to basically stay in Las Vegas for most of the movie, which, I mean, it's not a bad location, but there's not as much variety with this one, and it feels like Diamonds Are Forever isn't quite as exotic as some of the other Bond films. And none of the action sequences really stood out to me, other than the elevator fight. That was the only one that I really felt any tension for. The moon buggy chase, I think it's overrated. I don't see what's so great about it. And the car chase, I mean, okay, the car sort of tilts to the side. That's cool. Don't get me wrong. None of it really got me going. I mean, the finale at the oil rig is really anticlimactic, to be honest. And I just did not care for Tiffany Case. I just thought she was a complete bimbo. I mean, she certainly turns into a bimbo towards the end anyway, when she's trying to fire the gun and... yeah, I don't know. Look, I don't mean to be a downer, but Diamonds Are Forever, it just drags for me as well. It has very poor pacing, and I just personally can't get into it. And I know people have asked me, oh, well, you like Moonraker, but you don't like Diamonds Are Forever. Well, the difference is with Moonraker is that it's very Star Wars-esque, and I'm more of a Star Wars fan. And for me, whilst, okay, maybe Bond going into space seems a bit ridiculous, it was only towards the third act that it got a little bit silly. Whereas Diamonds Are Forever, throughout the movie, it's quite silly. And also, John Barry's score isn't his best one, but there's a couple of good tracks in there, like Bond Smells a Rat. That's a decent one, but a lot of the time the music just goes... The opening with Blofeld as well, it's also very anticlimactic given what happened in the previous film. So anyway, moving on to number 22, The World Is Not Enough. Look, I don't want it to come across like I hate Pierce Brosnan as Bond, because I don't. I don't hate Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. I just felt like his movies really suffered. Well, most of his movies suffered with the bad writing and directing. And Michael Apted, rest in peace, did a good job. And like I said, I take this one over the other two. I actually think this movie is okay. It's just okay. For me, a lot of the story elements are kind of boring, like the whole plot about the oil. I couldn't care. I really couldn't care less about that. The villains I don't care for either, like Renard and Electra, and the whole concept of the bullet is just so contradictory. You know, how does a bullet, you know, stay in his head? You know, keeps him alive. It makes him stronger every day, but then he's going to die as it creeps its way into its skull. I find that a little bit unbelievable, to be honest, even for a Bond film. I just think as well, Robert Carlyle's performance isn't the best, especially when he's told that Electra's dead. He goes, no! He just kind of hams it up, you know. I'll give it this. Judi Dench has quite a lot to do in it, and she's quite good. Brosnan is probably at his best, to be honest. Brosnan's best performance, I would say, is The World Is Not Enough. He probably gives the most emotional performance of his era. I wouldn't say his performance is great, but it is good, and he's certainly getting closer to being more like the Fleming Bond. He's definitely a lot colder in this film, and he's prepared to go to the ends of the earth to kind of succeed in the mission. And there's still a lot of the sort of cheesiness and campiness of some of those other films, and some of the one-liners aren't the best, especially the last one. I thought Christmas only came around once a year. Yeah, Pierce, it does. And yeah, Christmas Jones, less said about her, the better. Well, she's hot, but yeah, it is nice to have Robbie Coltrane back in the movie as Zukovsky. I will say that. And the song, the title song, is okay, and the sequence is weird, but it's not bad, I suppose. The opening scene I quite like. It's quite a long action scene, but it is a good one. It's a good way to sort of start the movie. The Thames chase is really cool. But yeah, there wasn't much to the story for me. It was just very by the numbers, and I thought the film dragged a lot of the time. It had a lot of poor pacing. I think it could have been shaved off a little bit. The last film we're going to talk about in this part is number 21, which is Thunderball.
So he strikes like thunderball. He knows the meaning.
Yes, Thunderball, the fourth Sean Connery Bond film. I've never been a big fan of Thunderball. If you know my channel, you know that I'm not huge on it. I think it's a bit better than I used to think it is. I think now it's just okay. I love the style of this movie. This movie is one of the most glamorous Bond movies ever made, and I think you can see that. They put every ounce of money into the look of it, into the way it looks, the glamour of it. The production values are astounding. I mean, coming after Goldfinger, they really had to do something to keep people's interest because there was Bond mania at that time. While I think the underwater fighting looks cool, it really slows the movie down a lot. The final battle is cool underwater, but if it was edited differently, maybe then it would be better. I feel like the editing is the weakest part of this film. This film is too long. It drags on so much. The pace of this film is really slow, which is why it's down here on the list. It's not a Bond film I often rewatch because I find it really hard to get into it. It takes 36 minutes for Bond to really get on his mission. For most of the first act, he's fumbling around in this clinic doing fuck all, basically. The story's not that interesting to me. I don't think that it was all that. I like Domino as a Bond girl. I think she's pretty cool. I mean, the villain Largo, didn't care for him very much. I mean, he just wears an eye patch, you know. Yeah, big whoop. But it's nice that Spectre got quite a bit of involvement in the film, which is good. For me, it's the editing. If it was cut differently, if it was paced differently, perhaps I would have enjoyed it. It does feel like a director's cut in places. Sean Connery is giving a decent performance, I'd say, but I think Connery is getting to the point where he's slowly kind of losing interest in the part a little bit. What I do love is the song. Tom Jones's Thunderball song is amazing. That's a great song, and the titles are pretty good. The opening is kind of silly with a jetpack, but still, you know, it's a product of its time, I guess. That's it for part 1 of this ranking. So far, just to recap, we have number 25, Die Another Day, 24, Tomorrow Never Dies, 23, Diamonds Are Forever, 22, The World Is Not Enough, and number 21, Thunderball. So, that's it for part 1. Stay tuned next time when I do part 2 of my Bond movies ranking. So until then, I'm Mr. TARDIS11. See ya.